Imagine this. You stop reaching out, you stop checking in, you stop making all the effort, and suddenly something shifts, not just in the way he acts, but in the way you feel. Silence isn't just a lack of communication. It's a strategy, a test, and a truth serum all at once. It forces reality to the surface. And the question is, when you stop speaking, what does his silence say? Silence is not about playing games or manipulation. It's about clarity. It's a tool that reveals a man's true intentions, shifts the power dynamics in your relationship, and helps you step back into your worth. When you remove yourself from the equation, you give him the opportunity to show his real priorities. Does he step up or does he disappear? Either way, you get your answer. In this talk, we're going to explore why silence is so powerful in relationships, how men react when you stop reaching out, and what their response or lack of it really means. More importantly, you'll learn how silence isn't just about him, it's about you. It's about regaining control over your emotions, stopping the cycle of chasing, and attracting the love you truly deserve. If you've ever felt like you're putting in all the effort while he stays distant, if you've ever wondered whether you're wasting your time on someone who doesn't truly value you, this is for you. By the end of this speech, you'll understand why stepping back is sometimes the most powerful move you can make, and how silence can bring you the answers you've been looking for. Silence is one of the most powerful tools in relationships, especially when it comes to understanding a man's true feelings and intentions. When you step back and stop initiating contact, you create a shift in the dynamic that forces both you and him to see things more clearly. Many women fear silence because they associate it with rejection, loneliness, or losing a connection they've worked hard to maintain. But in reality, silence is not about loss, it's about revelation. It forces a man to confront the space you once filled and determine whether he values your presence enough to close the gap. Men thrive on certainty and predictability. When a woman is always available and always reaching out and always filling the silence with words and effort, a man becomes comfortable. He knows she'll always be there, so he doesn't have to question his feelings or consider what life would be like without her. But when that pattern is broken, when she stops reaching out and allows silence to take its place, an unsettling feeling begins to set in. Suddenly, he has to ask himself questions he's never had to consider before. Why hasn't she texted? Does she still care? Did I do something wrong? Does she even need me? That uncertainty is what compels a man to evaluate his emotions in a way he wouldn't if she continued doing all the work. Beyond creating uncertainty, silence also acts as a mirror that reflects a man's true priorities. If a man truly values a woman, her absence will create a void that he will feel compelled to fill. He will recognize what she brought into his life and will make an effort to reestablish that connection. On the other hand, if he was simply enjoying the convenience of her presence without truly appreciating it, he may not feel any urgency to step up. His lack of action speaks volumes about how much or how little he values the relationship. This is where silence becomes so powerful. It allows a woman to see the truth not through words or empty promises, but through real actions, or the lack thereof. One of the biggest misconceptions about using silence in relationships is that it's a form of manipulation. Some may think that withdrawing communication is a way to control or punish a man into doing what they want. But true silence isn't about playing games. It's about clarity. It's about removing yourself from a situation where you're doing all the work and allowing the relationship to breathe. When you take a step back, you aren't forcing him to do anything. You're simply giving him the space to make his own choice. His response to that space is his alone, and it reveals everything you need to know. Silence also shifts the power dynamic in a relationship. When a woman constantly reaches out, she is the one chasing. She is the one seeking reassurance, validation, and connection. But when she stops, she regains control over her emotions and energy. She is no longer placing her happiness in his hands, waiting for his response, basing her worth on his level of attention. Instead, she is choosing herself. She is setting a boundary, whether consciously or not, that says, I will not be the only one putting in effort. If you want me in your life, show me. This subtle but powerful shift in energy can be felt, and men notice it immediately. What often surprises women is how much a man's perception of them changes when they embrace silence. A woman who is constantly available can sometimes be taken for granted. Her consistency, while a beautiful quality, can lead to a dynamic where a man feels less urgency to invest deeply. But when she becomes silent, when she stops reaching out, she becomes a mystery. She is no longer predictable. He starts to wonder what she's thinking, what she's doing, and whether she's losing interest. This uncertainty often reignites attraction and curiosity. It forces him to step into the role of the pursuer rather than the pursued. There is also an internal transformation that happens when a woman chooses silence. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. She may be tempted to break the silence, to check in or to rationalize why she should reach out. But with time, she begins to realize the power of her absence. She starts to see the relationship more clearly. She notices how much effort he's really putting in. She feels the shift in her own energy, recognizing that she is no longer anxiously waiting for his validation. Instead, she's observing and allowing things to unfold naturally. This is why silence is so much more than just the absence of words. It's a tool for self-discovery and empowerment. It teaches a woman that she doesn't have to force connection, chase love, or prove her worth to anyone. The right man will recognize her value without constant reminders. And if he doesn't, then silence has done its job. It has revealed the truth. When a woman decides to go silent and stops initiating contact, a man's reaction can tell her everything she needs to know about where he stands in the relationship. At first, many men respond with indifference. They assume she's just busy, having a rough day, or waiting for the right moment to reach out again. In the early stages, he may not even register the silence as something significant. He's been accustomed to her always making the effort. He might subconsciously expect her to resume her usual behavior. He may not immediately panic or show concern because, in his mind, the pattern will continue as it always has. However, as time passes and she remains silent, his reaction starts to shift. The realization begins to creep in. Something is different. This is the moment where he starts to question what's happening. Has she lost interest? Is she upset? Is she seeing someone else? The absence of her usual communication disrupts his routine, and that disruption is what forces him to take notice. A man who has been taking a woman's presence for granted will now experience what life is like without her constant attention. Even if he was emotionally distant before, silence creates an undeniable shift in energy that he can't ignore. As his awareness grows, he may start testing the waters to see if she will resume contact. This could come in the form of a random text, a meme, or a casual. Hey, hope you're doing okay. These messages aren't always a sign of deep emotional investment. They are often an attempt to check if she is still available. Without making too much effort, men who are used to minimal investment may not immediately change their behavior, but they will notice the shift. The key for a woman in this stage is to observe rather than react impulsively. Is he reaching out with genuine effort? Or is he just looking for reassurance that she's still an option? For men who truly care, silence has a much deeper effect. Instead of just checking in casually, they begin to reflect on their own actions. Why did she stop reaching out? Have I been putting in enough effort? Do I actually miss her, or do I just miss the attention? This is where silence forces a level of introspection that wouldn't happen if she continued to reach out as usual. Some men will realize they have been emotionally absent and will step up to bridge the gap. Others may come to the conclusion that they were never fully invested in the first place, and instead of stepping up, they pull away further. Either way, silence brings clarity. There are only two real outcomes when a woman chooses silence. The first is that he realizes her value and actively works to reconnect. This means he doesn't just send a vague message, but actually makes an effort. He calls, he plans a date, he engages in meaningful conversation. He wants to restore the connection and is willing to put in the work to do so. When a man truly cares, he won't let silence linger indefinitely. He will take action because losing her presence is not an option for him. This is the kind of response that shows he values her and sees her as someone important in his life. The second possible outcome is that he remains indifferent. He either gives minimal effort, such as the occasional check in text with no real follow-through, or he disappears completely. As painful as this can be, it's actually a gift. It reveals his true level of investment and saves a woman from wasting more time and energy on someone who was never truly committed. A man who doesn't feel the need to reach out, who is comfortable with the silence, is showing exactly where she stands in his life. Instead of chasing after him for clarity, the clarity comes on its own. Some men, when faced with silence, will become defensive or frustrated. They may accuse the woman of playing games or trying to manipulate them. This reaction often comes from men who are used to control. Men who like knowing the woman is always available, but don't want to put in the effort to truly nurture the relationship. A man who genuinely cares will not see silence as a manipulation tactic, but as a wake-up call. He will reflect on his behavior and make the necessary adjustments, rather than becoming angry or dismissive. It's important to recognize that silence isn't about making a man chase or testing him in a manipulative way. It's about observing his natural response. When a woman stops doing all the work, his reaction is not something she can control, nor should she try to. The power of silence lies in allowing the truth to reveal itself without forcing anything. If he values her, he will make that clear through his actions. If he doesn't, then silence has done its job by exposing the reality of the situation. This process can be an emotional roller coaster, especially for women who are used to always being the ones to initiate contact and keep the relationship going. It takes patience and self-restraint to resist the urge to fill the silence, especially when emotions are involved. But those who embrace it will find that the answers they were searching for come naturally. The way a man reacts to silence speaks louder than any words he could ever say. His actions or inactions are the only response that truly matters. Emotional distance and space are often confused in relationships, but they serve very different purposes. Space is a natural and healthy part of any relationship, allowing both individuals to grow, reflect, and maintain their independence while still being connected. Emotional distance, on the other hand, signals a deeper issue, whether it be a lack of emotional investment, detachment, or a fading connection. Understanding the difference between the two is crucial, because one strengthens a relationship while the other reveals its weaknesses. When a woman pulls back and embraces silence, she is creating space, not necessarily emotional distance. Space allows a relationship to breathe and gives both partners the opportunity to assess what they truly want. It forces a man to reflect on his feelings without the constant input of her presence, conversations, or attention. A man who values her will use this space as a moment of realization. He will miss the connection, think about the importance of the relationship, and feel a natural urge to close the gap. This is a sign that the relationship has depth and that he recognizes her absence as something meaningful. However, if silence leads to emotional distance instead of a desire to reconnect, it reveals something much deeper. When a man is emotionally disconnected, space does not create longing or reflection. Instead, it reinforces his lack of emotional investment. He doesn't feel the need to close the gap because in his mind there was no deep connection to begin with. This is one of the hardest truths to accept, but it is also one of the most valuable insights a woman can gain from silence. It prevents her from continuing to invest in someone who does not feel the same level of attachment. A man's response to space can tell a woman whether he truly values her or if she was just a convenience in his life. If he was merely enjoying her attention, affection, and effort without genuinely reciprocating, her silence will not provoke much of a response. He may even welcome the space as an opportunity to further detach, proving that his emotional presence in the relationship was always minimal. In contrast, if he truly cares, he will feel the loss. He will realize that her presence brought something meaningful to his life, and he will take action to restore that connection. Some men may not immediately understand their own feelings when faced with silence. At first, they may assume that they enjoy the space. They may feel a temporary sense of freedom, believing that they are unaffected by her absence. But as time passes, the depth of their emotion becomes clearer. A man who truly values a woman will feel her absence in ways he didn't expect. He will notice that conversations feel emptier, that certain moments feel incomplete without her, and that his daily life lacks a certain warmth. This realization often takes time, which is why patience is essential when using silence as a means of gaining clarity. On the other hand, a man who does not respond to silence at all is showing his true colors. If he does not reach out, does not reflect, and does not attempt to reconnect, then he has made his priorities clear He may not even consciously decide to let the relationship fade, but his inaction is a decision in itself. Many women hold on to hope in these situations, believing that if they wait long enough, he will eventually realize what he's lost. But in reality, his lack of urgency speaks volumes. It is better to recognize this truth early, rather than continue investing in a one-sided relationship. Silence is also a tool for self-reflection. It allows a woman to ask herself important questions. Am I settling for less than I deserve? Am I the only one putting in effort? Do I feel valued in this relationship? The way a man reacts to space provides the answers to these questions. If he steps up and closes the gap, it affirms that the relationship has potential. If he allows emotional distance to remain, then the truth is clear. His investment was never strong enough. In some cases, silence can serve as a wake-up call for both partners. A man who has been emotionally distant may realize that he is at risk of losing someone valuable, and this realization can prompt real change. However, this change must come from a genuine place, not from fear of losing attention or convenience. A woman must observe whether his response is consistent, or if he only puts in effort temporarily before falling back into old patterns. The ultimate power of silence is that it removes illusions. Words can be misleading, but actions reveal the truth. A man's willingness or unwillingness to close the emotional gap speaks louder than any promises he might have made in the past. Silence creates the space needed to see things as they truly are, and in doing so, it gives a woman the clarity and strength to either move forward with someone who values her or to walk away from someone who never truly did. Silence is one of the most powerful tools for introspection in relationships, both for men and women. When communication pauses, the mind has no choice but to fill in the gaps with reflection. For men, this process can be uncomfortable because it forces them to confront feelings they may have been avoiding. When a woman who was always available suddenly withdraws, a man is left to process the absence on his own. This creates a mental and emotional shift that brings his true thoughts and priorities to the surface. At first, he may not think much of the silence. If he was used to her always reaching out, he may assume that it is temporary and that she will eventually return to her usual pattern. But as time passes and she remains distant, his mind starts working in ways it hadn't before. He begins to question why she stopped reaching out, whether he did something wrong, or whether she is losing interest. This process is not just about missing her presence. It's about recognizing how much space she held in his life. If she was a significant part of his daily routine, the shift is as impossible to ignore. As this introspection deepens, he begins to evaluate his own actions. And did he take her for granted? Did he fail to appreciate her effort? Men often operate in a pattern of comfort, assuming that as long as things seem fine, there is no need for change. But silence disrupts that sense of security and forces him to acknowledge his role in the dynamic. If he genuinely cares, this period of reflection will push him toward a decision. Does he step up and show effort, or does he let things fade? His response to this internal dialogue reveals how much he truly values the relationship. For some men, silence brings clarity in a way that words never could. Can they begin to realize that they enjoyed the relationship not just because it was convenient, but because they genuinely appreciated her presence? These men will recognize the emotional void created by her absence and feel a desire to close the gap. They may even experience regret for past actions or inactions that contributed to her pulling away. This realization often leads to a more genuine effort to reconnect, not out of fear of losing her, but out of a newfound understanding of her importance. On the other hand, some men will avoid this introspection altogether. Instead of facing their emotions, they distract themselves with work, hobbies, or other relationships. Rather than acknowledging their role in the silence, they may convince themselves that it doesn't matter or that she was the one who chose to distance herself. These men struggle with emotional depth and may not be ready for a serious relationship. In this case, silence serves its purpose. It reveals the truth about where they stand and whether they are willing to engage in self-reflection. For a woman, this period of silence is also a moment of self-discovery. She can use this time to evaluate what she truly wants in a relationship. Is she feeling relieved by the distance? Or does she genuinely miss him? Does she feel empowered by stepping back? Or is she waiting anxiously for his response? These questions help her to determine whether she was in a fulfilling relationship or simply holding on to something that no longer served her. Silence not only reveals a man's intentions, but also a woman's emotional needs and expectations. If a man does decide to step up after a period of reflection, his actions will determine whether his effort is genuine. True introspection leads to meaningful change, not just temporary gestures. A man who is truly reflective will communicate differently. He will acknowledge his past mistakes, express his feelings more clearly, and take intentional steps to show that he values the relationship. This is the difference between someone who has grown from the silence and someone who is merely reacting out of fear of losing comfort. It's important for a woman to observe whether his response is consistent over time. Some men will put in effort initially, but slowly revert to their old habits. True introspection results in lasting change, while superficial reactions fade quickly. If his behavior shifts permanently, and he prioritizes the relationship, it means the silence had a real impact. But if he only makes a short-lived effort before returning to emotional distance, then the silence simply exposed his inability to sustain genuine emotional connection. Ultimately, silence acts as a test of emotional maturity. It forces both people to confront their true feelings, desires, and priorities. A man who is emotionally aware will take the silence as an opportunity to reflect, grow, and strengthen the relationship. A man who is emotionally unavailable will let the silence linger without meaningful action. Either way, the outcome is clear. The power of silence is not in forcing a reaction, but in revealing the truth. Whether a man steps up or steps away, the clarity it provides is invaluable. Silence is not just a tool for understanding a man's intentions, it is a powerful means of reclaiming a woman's energy and self-worth. In many relationships, women give so much of themselves emotionally, mentally, and even physically without receiving the same level of investment in return. They often feel the need to overcompensate, prove their worth, and constantly maintain the connection, fearing that if they don't, the relationship will fall apart. However, when a woman embraces silence, she shifts the focus from the man to herself. She stops pouring her energy into someone else and instead redirects it inward, allowing herself to heal, reflect, and grow. This period of silence provides the space necessary to evaluate whether she has been overextending herself in the relationship. Was she the one always reaching out first? Was she constantly making compromises while he remained passive? Was she putting in effort while receiving little in return? These are questions that are often overlooked when a woman is deeply invested in someone. When she takes a step back, the reality becomes clearer. She begins to see whether the relationship was truly balanced, or if she was carrying the weight of it alone. This realization can be painful, but is also liberating because it allows her to recognize her true worth. During this time, a woman must resist the urge to break the silence just to seek validation. Many women fear that if they stop reaching out, they will lose the connection entirely. But in reality, if the relationship depended solely on her effort, then it was never a stable or healthy relationship to begin with. A man who truly values her will notice her absence and take action. If he does not, then the silence has served its purpose. It has exposed his lack of investment. This truth, while difficult to accept, is a gift. It prevents her from continuing to chase after something that was never truly meant for her. Beyond gaining clarity about the relationship, silence also provides a woman with the opportunity to reconnect with herself. So often, women lose themselves in relationships, prioritizing their partner's needs over their own. They forget what it feels like to focus on their own happiness, goals, and personal growth. When she stops chasing, she starts rediscovering herself. She can take this time to pursue her passions, strengthen her friendships, invest in her well-being, and set new standards for what she truly wants in a partner. Instead of seeking external validation, she begins to create a sense of fulfillment from within. This shift in focus is what ultimately increases a woman's sense of self-worth. When she stops seeking attention or approval from a man, she realizes that her value is not dependent on his recognition. She does not need to be chosen to feel worthy. She is already enough on her own. This newfound confidence changes the way she carries herself, the way she interacts with others, and the way she approaches relationships in the future. She is no longer willing to accept bare minimum effort because she understands that she deserves more. This mindset shift is powerful because it sets a new standard for how she allows herself to be treated. When a woman embraces silence and prioritizes her self-worth, she actually sets boundaries without even having to verbalize them. She is no longer available for inconsistent effort or one-sided relationships. She no longer tolerates being put on the back burner while waiting for a man to decide whether he wants to commit. Instead, she sends a clear message. If he wants to be in her life, he has to show up fully and consistently. This shift forces men to either step up or step aside. Those who truly care will recognize her value and match her energy. Those who don't will fade away, making room for someone who truly appreciates her. Silence also teaches a woman that she does not need to beg for love, attention, or commitment. Love should be freely given, not something that has to be chased or forced. If a man truly wants to be with her, he will make the effort to show it. If he does not, then she is better off without him. This realization is what allows her to walk away with dignity, rather than settling for less than she deserves. The moment she stops chasing is the moment she starts attracting relationships that are based on mutual effort and respect. Ultimately, silence is not just about testing a man's reaction, it is about rediscovering one's own power. It is about shifting from a place of neediness to a place of self-assurance. It is about recognizing that true love does not require constant effort to prove one's worth. When a woman stands firm in her value and refuses to settle, she creates space for the right person to enter her life. Someone who sees her worth from the start and treats her accordingly. Silence is not just about stepping back from a man to see how he reacts. It is about building inner confidence and learning to stand firm in your worth. Many women unknowingly tie their self-esteem to a man's response, believing that his attention or affection determines their value. When he pulls away or remains indifferent, self-doubt creeps in, making them question what they did wrong or whether they were good enough. But true confidence comes from within, not from external validation. When a woman learns to embrace silence and detachment, she gains the power to define her worth on her own terms, without needing a man's reassurance. Inner confidence is built when a woman realizes she does not need to chase love. A relationship should be an addition to her life, not the source of her happiness. When she embraces silence, she begins to understand that being alone is not a punishment. It is an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. She starts to enjoy her own company, set personal goals, and cultivate a life that feels fulfilling without relying on anyone else to complete it. This shift in mindset transforms the way she approaches relationships because she no longer feels the need to cling to a man out of fear of being alone. Instead, she chooses connections that genuinely add value to her life. One of the biggest lessons silence teaches is that a man's reaction, or lack thereof, is not a reflection of a woman's worth. If he does not step up when she steps back, it does not mean she was not good enough. It simply means he was not the right person for her. Many women make the mistake of internalizing a man's indifference as a personal failure, when in reality, his actions or inactions only reveal his level of emotional availability. A confident woman understands that the right man will not need to be convinced, chased, or constantly reminded of her value. He will recognize it naturally and act accordingly. When a woman builds her confidence through silence, she also develops the ability to set stronger boundaries. She no longer tolerates inconsistency, mixed signals, or breadcrumbing because she knows she deserves more. She no longer feels the need to settle for half-hearted effort or a man who cannot make up his mind about her. Instead, she stands firm in her standards, refusing to accept anything less than what she truly wants. This newfound strength makes her more attractive because men respect women who respect themselves. A woman who knows her worth does not beg for attention. She commands it through her presence, her actions, and her self-assurance. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it teaches a woman to detach emotionally from outcomes she cannot control. Often, women invest so much energy into trying to make a man feel a certain way or hoping he will change. But true confidence comes from understanding that she cannot force someone to see her value. He either sees it or he does not. When she stops trying to control his response and instead focuses on controlling her own reactions, she gains emotional freedom. She no longer feels anxious about whether he will call or text. She no longer overanalyzes his behavior or waits for his approval. Instead, She lets things unfold naturally, knowing that whatever is meant for her will come effortlessly. Silence also strengthens a woman's emotional resilience. In the past, she may have panicked when a man became distant, immediately trying to fix the situation by over-communicating or overcompensating. But now she understands that distance is a test, one that reveals whether he truly values her presence or was simply comfortable with her effort. By remaining silent, she allows herself to observe rather than react. She gives him the space to make his own decision, rather than trying to convince him to stay. This ability to remain calm and composed in uncertain situations is a sign of true confidence and emotional maturity. Over time, a woman who embraces silence begins to radiate a different kind of energy, an energy of self-assurance, independence, and quiet strength. She no longer seeks validation from a man because she validates herself. She no longer feels anxious about a man's response because she trusts that the right one will recognize her worth without hesitation. She no longer settles for bare minimum effort because she knows she deserves someone who meets her at her level. This shift in mindset doesn't just change her relationships, it changes her entire life. Ultimately, silence is not about manipulation or playing games. It is about self-empowerment. It is about stepping back not to make a man miss her, but to make herself remember her own value. When a woman masters the art of silence, she gains a sense of peace that no relationship status can shake. She understands that she is complete on her own, and that any man who enters her life should be an addition, not a necessity. This level of confidence attracts the right kind of love, one that is built on mutual effort, respect, and appreciation rather than fear, insecurity, or desperation. Silence creates space for the right person to step up. When a woman stops chasing, explaining, and constantly seeking reassurance, she allows the natural flow of a relationship to reveal itself. A man who truly values her will feel the shift and take action because he recognizes that her presence in his life is not guaranteed. This is a fundamental truth in relationships. People put effort into what they truly care about. If he sees her as someone worth having, he will not let silence be the thing that separates them. Instead, he will rise to meet her energy and match the effort she was previously giving on her own. This shift in energy is crucial because it filters out men who were never fully invested in the first place. Many women waste time trying to convince the wrong person to see their worth, when in reality, the right person will recognize it without hesitation. When she embraces silence, she stops negotiating for love and instead allows love to be freely given. This is how she attracts what she truly deserves. Not by chasing, but by standing firm in her value and allowing a man to prove that he deserves a place in her life. Silence, in this sense, is a form of self-respect. It says, I will not beg for love. I will not overextend myself for someone who is unsure about me. If you want to be here, show me. If a man does not respond to her silence, it is a clear sign that he was never truly invested. Many women struggle with accepting this truth because it feels personal, but it is not. A man's indifference is not a reflection of her worth. It is a reflection of his emotional capacity and level of investment. When he does not respond, she is left with two choices: continue waiting for someone who does not prioritize her, or move forward and make space for the person who will. The right choice is always to move forward. A woman who knows her value does not beg to be seen. She allows people to show up as they are, and when someone shows they do not care, she believes them the first time. By choosing silence instead of constantly seeking closure or clarity from a man, she gives herself the opportunity to heal and detach. So often, women prolong their own pain by refusing to accept the reality of a situation. They keep texting, asking for answers, hoping that if they just explain their feelings one more time, he will suddenly understand and change. But this rarely works. A man who is emotionally unavailable or uninterested will not suddenly wake up and become the partner she wants him to be just because she keeps reaching out. Instead, it is through silence, through the absence of her energy, that she gets the clearest answer. If he does not reach out, she has all the closure she needs. As she lets go of what is not meant for her, she naturally attracts better connections. When a woman is constantly chasing after an emotionally unavailable man, it creates an energy of desperation, which repels the type of love she actually wants. But when she stands firm, values herself, and refuses to entertain half-hearted effort, she shifts into an energy of self-assurance. This energy is magnetic. It draws in people who are equally confident, emotionally mature, and ready for real connection. The best relationships come from mutual effort and reciprocity, not one person doing all the work while the other simply receives. Silence helps a woman break the cycle of one-sided relationships by forcing her to only entertain those who meet her halfway. This shift in mindset also allows her to redefine what she truly wants in a partner. Often, when she is too focused on a specific person, she ignores red flags, makes excuses, and settles for less than she deserves. But when she takes a step back and stops forcing things, she gains clarity. She begins to see that real love does not require constant pursuit or emotional exhaustion. She understands that the right person will not make her question where she stands, will not give her mixed signals, and will not require her to prove her worth. The right person will see her, choose her, and show up for her in a way that feels natural and secure. Silence ultimately helps a woman create a standard for the love she is willing to accept. She no longer tolerates inconsistency, uncertainty, or lukewarm interest. Instead, she aligns herself with relationships that are built on respect, effort, and genuine appreciation. She no longer waits for a man to decide if he wants to be with her. She decides if he is worthy of being in her life. This change in perspective is what allows her to attract the love she deserves, rather than settling for whatever is given to her. When she embraces silence, she does not just gain power in relationships, she gains power in life. She learns to trust herself, set boundaries, and walk away from anything that does not serve her. She stops chasing and starts receiving. And most importantly, she learns that real love does not require begging, proving, or waiting. It simply flows effortlessly in the right direction. Silence is not about punishment or manipulation. It is about clarity and growth. Many women have been conditioned to believe that relationships require constant effort, communication, and compromise. But they often overlook the importance of stepping back and allowing space for truth to reveal itself. When a woman embraces silence, she gains a new perspective on her relationship. She no longer reacts impulsively or out of fear. Instead, she allows things to unfold naturally, giving her the insight she needs to make the best decisions for herself. The most powerful aspect of silence is the clarity it brings. A woman who steps back and remains silent gives herself the opportunity to see whether the relationship is truly serving her. If a man values her, he will take action to maintain the connection. If he does not, she receives a clear answer without having to beg, chase, or overanalyze. This realization is liberating because it shifts the dynamic from desperation to empowerment. She no longer seeks answers from him. She finds them in his actions, or lack thereof, by using silence to reclaim her power, peace, and self-worth. She stops giving energy to relationships that drain her. She realizes that she has spent too much time trying to prove her value to people who were never capable of appreciating it. Instead of constantly explaining herself or hoping for change, she redirects her focus inward. She nurtures her own happiness, invests in personal growth, and rebuilds her sense of self outside of the relationship. This process allows her to break free from patterns of seeking validation from men and instead develop an unshakable confidence in herself. Silence also forces her to evaluate what she truly wants. When she stops chasing a man's attention, she can finally ask herself, is this really the type of relationship I want? Too often, women get caught up in trying to make something work without stepping back to assess whether it is even aligned with their needs and desires. The space that silence creates allows her to think clearly and recognize whether she has been settling for less than she deserves. This introspection is necessary for growth because it helps her establish new standards for the kind of love she is willing to accept. Another powerful shift happens when she realizes that she does not need to prove her worth to anyone. A woman who fully understands her value no longer seeks validation through a man's response. She knows that she is enough with or without him. This change in mindset frees her from emotional dependency and allows her to approach relationships from a place of confidence rather than insecurity. She no longer fears losing someone who does not put in the effort to keep her. Instead, she embraces the idea that the right person will not need to be convinced, chased, or reminded of her worth. Letting go of what is not meant for her is one of the most difficult but necessary steps toward attracting what she truly deserves. When a woman clings to a man who is not reciprocating her energy, she blocks herself from receiving the kind of love that is available to her elsewhere. It is only when she fully lets go, without fear, regret, or second guessing, that she creates space for a relationship that aligns with her values and desires. This is not about giving up on love. It is about refusing to settle for anything less than what she deserves. One of the greatest rewards of silence is the sense of peace that comes with it. No longer trapped in cycles of overthinking, analyzing mixed signals, or waiting for a response, she finds herself in a place of emotional freedom. She is no longer reactive to a man's behavior, but instead chooses how she wants to engage.